Hi, my name's Don, and today we're going to talk about stem-changing verbs in German. Now, these are also known as strong verbs, so you might see that listed in your textbook, or your instructor might refer to them as strong verbs. Others might refer to them as vowel-changing verbs. But generally, in a lot of books, you'll see something called stem-changing verbs. Now, they're called stem-changing because something does happen to the vowel in the stem of the verb. It changes. And we're going to get into some examples a little bit here in a second, but for those that don't remember what a stem is, we're going to take a quick review of that right now. So what is a stem? Well, basically a verb is made up of two parts. It's made up of its stem and its ending. And what we call the infinitive, and you might have seen this in your textbook, or maybe your teachers refer to it this way, the infinitive of the verb is often the full form of the verb that you see in the dictionary. So for example, to sleep, the verb is schlafen. And so the stem, all it is it's the part of the verb minus that very last en. So it's schlaf and then n, and if you put them together for the infinitive, you get what's called schlafen. That's your infinitive form of the verb. So when we say infinitive, that's what we mean. It's the stem plus the ending, or the main part of the verb schlaf plus the en. And so therefore the stem is simply just the main part of the verb minus its en ending at the end. Okay, so for example, schlafen stem, the verb that I'm using here, would be schlaf. I just got rid of the final en. So again, why are they called stem-changing verbs? As I just mentioned, because again, the vowel, something in the stem, changes, okay, and it's going to be the vowel typically. And this usually happens only when you conjugate for do, you singular, right, like hey you, he, sie, she, or s, it. So do, sie, or s. This is where you're going to see those stem changes. Now there are typically 4 different patterns that you see for these stem-changing verbs. One of them is an a in the stem. When you conjugate it to do, sie, or s, will become with the a with the umlaut. Okay. The second form that you typically see is the au. So if you got that vowel combination in your stem, they'll switch it over to an a with an umlaut u, or oi. You might also see an e in the stem, German that's called a, and then when it conjugates to do, sie, or s, it's going to end up being e, or in English we call that I. The last possible pattern is an e, or in German we call that a, right? When you conjugate in the do, sie, or s form, it'll become ie, or as you pronounce it in German, e. Okay? So let's take a look at a few examples. And before we get to some of those examples, let's review a little bit about conjugation generally. So let's take a look at the basic pattern. And hopefully this chart looks familiar to you. If you can't see it on the screen, hopefully you have the PowerPoint below. I have a verb here, for example, machen, which is something that hopefully you're familiar with. But it follows the same pattern with heißen, and I know that's a verb you are familiar with. Ich heiße Don. I am called Don. I'm doing my homework. Machen is a verb to mean to do. So ich mache meine Hausaufgabe. I'm doing my homework. So here in this chart I have machen. Machen again is our infinitive, right? We got the stem plus that en that's on there. Machen. So that makes the infinitive form. So how do we conjugate that again? If you remember, basic verb conjugation in German is you take the stem, which means get rid of that en at the end, and then add the appropriate ending. So if it's ich, the ending is an e, so ich mache. Or again in German it's a. If it's du, we get an st ending, so du machst. Sie oder s just gets a t ending to the stem, so you get mach plus t, or macht. And I'll just go right down the list. Wir becomes machen with the en ending, ihr becomes macht, und sie formal, singular and plural, or sie meaning they, plural, also gets an en ending, or machen. So that should be a nice review of how we basically do it. Now this pattern is going to follow into the stem-changing verbs. The only difference is, again, the vowel that's in that stem is going to change. Okay? So with conjugations, as always, please remember that there are a few minor exceptions. For example, when your verb stem ends in a D or a T, you often add an additional E in there, and it's mostly for pronunciation's sake. So an example of that would be arbeiten, to work. If you take just the stem, you get arbeit. Okay? And notice it ends in a T. And if it ends in a T, you're going to add an extra E in there, and then your appropriate ending. So if you see the example on the screen with du arbeitest, right, the ending for du is st, so we have the extra E for pronunciation, and then st in there, so du arbeitest. So again, that would be a minor exception to the rules I just showed you. Another exception too, of course, is if your verb stem ends in an S, set, an X, or a Z. And all of these sounds are part of a group. They all make kind of a s. There's something, it's the air passes through. When you get one of those that ends in one of those letters, you're going to drop the extra S in the do conjugation, because you don't need to add extra S's if an S sound is already there. So think about the verb you already know, heißen, right? It already ends in an S. So what's the point of adding a whole nother S on there to make 3 S's in a row? So that's another little conjugation exception to keep in mind. So now let's take a look at these stem changing verbs. So if you remember, one pattern that I had mentioned was A to E, right? So we have schlafen. Let's take that verb, to sleep. So you take the stem, which is schlaf, and then we conjugate normally, of course, for ich, wir, ihr, sie, and sie. Okay, those are always conjugated normally, even if it's a stem changing verb. So you don't need to worry about it. If you know the pattern with those, you're fine. What you have to watch out for, again, is the du, sie, or s. So schlafen, if you notice, has an A in the stem. And what do I have here? A changes to the umlauted A in du, sie, or s. So what you would have here then, and I have the chart up on the PowerPoint, is you'll notice that under, I have the asterisk by du, sie, or s. That's our stem changing forms. And look how I conjugated that now. It's not du schlafst. I had to change that vowel to the umlaut, so it becomes du schläfst. Take a look at sie, or s. It's not schlaft, but it's schläft. I have to transfer that to the umlauted A. And then if you look at the chart, you'll notice everything else is completely normal conjugation. Ich schlafe, wir schlafen, ihr schlaft, sie formal, or sie, they schlafen. Okay? And this pattern is going to repeat itself over and over again. So let's take a look at another possible stem vowel change. We have AU to the umlauted AU, or oi. So here's our verb laufen. What's our stem? Get rid of the en. What are we left with? It's lauf, right? So here we have that AU combination. So what do we know about this AU combination and its stem changing verb? Well, again, the first thing is you don't need to worry about ich, wir, ihr, sie, or sie, the plurals. Why? Because it doesn't change the vowel. So that gets normal conjugation. Don't need to worry about it. But in that du, sie, or s form, again, we got to change that vowel to now the A with the umlaut and the U. So it becomes läuft. So let's take a look at the conjugation chart. Again, completely normal, ich laufe. But again, look at where I put the asterisk marks by du, sie, and s, he, she, and it, right? You have the normal endings for du, st, and the normal ending for sie or s, which is t, but notice how the vowel is now changed. It's not du laufst, but it's du läufst with that umlaut. Same thing with sie or s. It's not lauft. We have to change that vowel, so now it's läuft. Okay? And again, the same pattern. Here we have e to I. Here's a verb example, geben. What's our stem? Geb. Again, we do not need to worry about ich, wir, sie, or ihr. But we do have to worry about du, sie, or s. And so what do we change this to? It's not geb, but it's gib. The e became an I here. Okay? So if we take a look at our conjugation chart again, everything else is normal but that du, sie, or s form. Ich gebe, but du gibst. Sie oder es gibt. So notice we changed that to our I now. And then everything else is normal. Wir geben, ihr gebt, and then sie geben. Okay? Now there are a few little additional verbs that are exceptions to this. I just want to point out for your knowledge with this e to I. And look at the upper corner of the PowerPoint presentation here. I have nehmen, and it becomes du nimmst. So two things actually happen with a few rare verbs like nehmen. Notice one, the E changed to the I, just like it does in this example. But also notice we got rid of the H and we got two M's in there. So you can see something else changed in the stem. Now this doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen with a few verbs. And it's very important to know, particularly with nehmen, because that's a verb you can use a lot. Nehmen means to take. So of course you use to take a lot whenever you're speaking. So just make a little asterisk that you do have this random exception, and nehmen is one of them. Okay? Our last category is then E to IE, or in German we would say A wird IE. Okay? And a verb example of that would be sehen, to see. So what's our stem again? We take away the en and we're left with seh. And then we do our appropriate conjugations. And again, ich, wir, ihr, sie, and sie, do not change at all. You just add your normal endings. There's no change to the vowel. But again, we got to watch out for do, z, or s. Okay? So we change E to IE, we get Z, and then we now add the appropriate conjugations, or the appropriate endings, I should say. So notice again in my chart, Ich sehe, but now look at do, or z, or s. We got the vowel change to IE, and then we still attach the appropriate endings. So it's now du siehst, or z, oder s, sie. Everything else is normal. Wir sehen, ihr seht, sie oder sie sehen. That's pretty much it for stem changing verbs. Again, you basically already know your conjugations. You've practiced those already. The extra little thing you have to watch out for with these verbs are the fact that that vowel sometimes changes. Now, so if you know already stem plus ending and how you change those things, you know how to conjugate these. You just got to watch out for the vowel. Here's the unfortunate part with these verbs. There really isn't a pattern or a way anyone can teach you that these go through this vowel change. This is unfortunately one of those things that you just have to sit down and memorize. Now luckily they tend to be more common verbs that are used a lot in German, so you get quite a bit of practice, I should say, at writing these and studying these, because they do come up frequently. So that's kind of the good part, indirectly, because they're so frequent, you see them a lot, you start to know them over time. But again, unfortunately, you do need to just sit down and learn these whenever you get a chance. So if you have any questions, please let your instructor know, and thanks.